So I guess to keep things moving and making sure we're on time for the day, I will start to introduce our panel as they are coming up. So if the panel members could have a seat up here. I'm Gwen Collman from the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, and I want to say that our institute has been thinking about data sharing issues for some time. Many of you know that the National Institutes of Health have data sharing policies for our grantee community, and we require data sharing plans for some of our investigators, depending on the size and scope of the funding that they receive. 2 years ago, our institute sponsored a workshop on this topic. We were interested in learning more about data sharing strategies in the field of environmental health sciences. As we see the policy arena changing over time, we thought we would get out in front of it and have a conversation with the community to see what their experience were with data sharing practices and what their current approaches and philosophy were about sharing their own data. The report and all the presentations from that meeting are on our NIEHS website, so I invite you all to look at that if you continue to be interested in this topic. And then just take one more minute as a sort of a public service announcement. April 3rd from noon to 2 o'clock, we'll be holding a webinar on data sharing. This one is particularly focused on junior and new researchers, people who are starting their lifelong career of collecting data, those who are postdocs or in academics, to talk to us about what their concerns are for the future. We seem to understand about the current practice, and we know about the history of creating large studies and sharing or not sharing under certain ideas, but we don't really know what the future will hold. With constraints in funding and the inability to develop new giant data sources, we as federal funders would like to get some return on our investment and have data that have been collected, used, and reused for lots of different purposes. And I think that the junior faculty around the country are probably anxious about how they could build careers using a new model. So on April 3rd, we'll be having a webinar. So I also invite any of you who are interested. You don't have to be a junior investigator to listen in to the conversation. But now I'll turn my attention to the panel here. And so I'd like to just briefly introduce our four speakers, and then if each of them could come to the podium to give their remarks. Some of you have slides, some of you don't, I believe. Our first speaker is Bernie Lowe. He's the president and CEO of the Greenwald Foundation. Prior to this, he was professor of medicine and director of the program in medical ethics at the University of California, San Francisco. Currently, he co-chairs the Standards Working Group of the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine, which recommends regulations for stem cell research funded by the state of California. And he is also a chair of an IOM panel on the clinical trials issue that you heard before. Dr. Francesca Dominici is the Senior Associate Dean for Research and Professor of Biostatistics at Harvard University School of Public Health. Her research has focused on the development of statistical methods for the analysis of large observational data with the ultimate goal of addressing important questions in environmental health sciences. The next is Dr. Julia Brody. She is the Executive Director of the Silent Spring Institute. She is a leader in the research on breast cancer in the environment and community-based research. Her current efforts are focused on methods for reporting data findings to people whose exposures to hormonal disruptors and other emerging contaminants when health effects are uncertain. And she's been involved in several research studies to develop that. And the last on our panel is Dr. Tony Cox. He's the Chief Science Officer of the Next Health Technologies, a healthcare analytics program and service provider that leverages big data and prescriptive analytics to recommend, manage, and optimize consumer engagement. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering and the NAS Board on Mathematical Sciences and Applications. So I just want to remind the panelists that Kathleen has some colored signs that you should be looking at while you speak so we can stay on time. And after the presentations, we'll have some time for discussion both with the panel and with the audience. Dr. Lowe?